Benjamin Netanyahu has wrapped up his Australian tour, the first by an Israeli Prime Minister. For more on that and the state of affairs in the Middle East, I was joined earlier by former US Ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, who held the post right up until last month. Dan Shapiro, thanks so much for joining us here on Lateline.
It's my pleasure. Things
have shifted significantly since you passed on the ambassadorial baton on the 20th of January. What is the current state of play for Israel and the Palestinian people?
At the moment, and this was true at the end of the Obama administration, the peace efforts between Israel and the Palestinians were in a complete stalemate, and they really still are. There's a significant lack of trust, I would say a total mistrust between the leaders. I think that reflects the views between the societies as well. There's an overhang of disillusionment and even despair because of the failures of previous peace negotiations. And so it's going to take a lot of creativity and some significant political leadership to get some sort of peace effort that has a chance to succeed back on track. President Trump has talked about, and he did this during Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit in Washington, a regional approach, something that would involve Arab states whose own interests align very much with Israel vis-a-vis the other radical actors of the region, such as Iran and ISIS, and that they might be able to use the cooperation, often very quiet security cooperation they've enjoyed on those issues as a basis to try to work back toward a renewed Israeli-Palestinian peace effort. But it's going to take a lot of creativity and, frankly, flexibility that none of the parties have shown so far to make that work.
Just in relation to that regional approach that you mentioned, in Australia this week, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke of a hope that moderate Muslim nations would turn to Israel as a beacon of light against the darkness. How realistic is that?
I think there's truth and there's a solid basis for it because of the common interests that they face. There's no question that in addition to the peace partnerships Israel has with Egypt and Jordan, many of the other moderate Sunni Arab states see Israel as a partner, as a fellow actor in the Middle East against the same enemies, be they Iran, ISIL, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, all of the radical actors of this region. And in that sense, there is a partnership. On the other hand, that is not necessarily enough to take what have been quiet security relationships and bring them to the surface with real normalization. If Arab states are able and willing to do that, it would obviously give Israelis greater confidence that they will be welcomed and integrated into the region, and that's to the good and to be encouraged. But I think it misunderstands the issue, the Palestinian issue, the role of the Palestinian issue in Arab politics to suggest that those Arab states can go very far in that direction while the Israeli-Palestinian issue remains in a total stalemate.
Now, coinciding with Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit here in Australia, we've seen this push from the opposition, including former Australian Prime Ministers, for a formal recognition of Palestine. It seems inevitable, or at least close to inevitable, that ultimately the Australian Labor Party will adopt that position as a party, which means within a couple of years or so, this could be Australia's formal position. What would that mean for Israel and the people there?
I don't know that that's a helpful step in the sense, and this has always been the United States position, that a recognition of a Palestinian state should be the result of a bilateral negotiation that produces an agreement on a two-state solution that ends the conflict. If there's a premature recognition, as some countries have already done and others may be considering, it's always been the U.S. position that that puts the cart before the horse. And it maybe even disincentivizes Palestinians from making some of the tough choices that they're going to have to make. I wouldn't make a recommendation to a foreign government about how they make their decision, but that's been U.S. policy. It was during the Obama administration to discourage moves toward recognition. I suspect it will continue to be during the Trump administration.
Could President Trump provide a reset button for the Middle East?
Well, anytime there's a new administration, of course, there's a new opportunity to chart a course and develop relationships. I think there are quite a number of countries in the Middle East who are trying to establish positive relations with the new administration. What I think has made it a little bit challenging is the relative lack of definition of the administration's policy in the first month in office. There's a Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who has not yet visited the Middle East. Prime Minister Netanyahu has visited Washington, but no other Middle Eastern leaders, I should say, with the exception of King Abdullah of Jordan, who made an unofficial visit. But most other leaders have not had direct high-level contact with the administration. And administration policy has been slow to be articulated.
Because we seem to be in this bizarre kind of limbo about whether we're pushing from the US point of view for a one-state solution, a two-state solution. Are we back to where we were almost a decade ago when it comes not just to the US, but to Israel's formal position on a one or a two-state solution for peace moving forward?
Frankly, I did not buy that as a change in U.S. policy, and indeed, within hours and over the days that followed, several administration spokespeople reaffirmed the longstanding U.S. support for a two-state solution. Indeed, there really is no other way you can resolve the conflict and actually bring it to an end. There's no other way Israel's needs for security and recognition as a Jewish and democratic state are going to be met. There's no other way Palestinian legitimate aspirations for statehood are going to be met. There's no other way to resolve this conflict in a way that benefits the regional security picture. And so the U.S. interest is very clear on this, as is the interest in limiting settlement construction because of the complicating factor that creates in trying to negotiate a two-state solution.
Dan Shapiro, we're almost out of time. I just wanted to ask you, some have suggested to me that the best thing the media could do to progress peace in the Middle East would be to stop talking about the conflict there, to allow some of the heat to go out of it. What do you think of that point of view?
I don't know how realistic it is. This is a part of the world that many people, for strategic, for historical, for religious reasons, care about, focus on. I do think, however, and this I say with the experience of 8 years of working on Israeli-Palestinian negotiations in the Obama administration, there were times when a lighter touch actually encouraged them in very practical ways to find solutions to problems on the ground, to create openings for economic development and cooperation, to ease certain security restrictions that were making life difficult for Palestinians. There were times when they were able to do more on their own than they were able to do with a strong mediator trying to influence the proceedings.
Dan Shapiro, thanks so much for joining us here on Late Line.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.